Welcome to our Sunday service here at First Unitarian Church of St. Louis. Hello, my name is Pamela Geppert, and I am a member of the worship committee. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This morning, our service is being led by Sabrina Trupia. Sabrina, as you might remember, has been here before. Sabrina was born and lived in Italy until they were 20. Their previous career was in science, specifically in research and development, largely in the field of biotechnology. In 21-22, as you may remember, they were the contextual intern here at First U, and they received a Master of Divinity from Eden Seminary. Sabrina just received preliminary fellowship from the UUA Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which means they are officially considered a minister by the association. They are back from a year-long internship in Montclair, New Jersey, and look forward to being a parish minister somewhere one day. Sabrina lives in Edwardsville, Illinois, with a spouse, Ed, a daughter, Isabella, and two adopted cats, Bo and Cap'n. Cap'n? Cap'n. Okay. Now, we are glad you could join us this Sunday, either in person or online. If you are a visitor or newcomer, we'd like to extend a special welcome. And if you are new to the congregation, be sure to fill out a newcomer form found in the live stream description or in the lobby of the church. Please stay after the service for conversation and refreshments in Fellowship Hall directly beneath the sanctuary. But you still have to walk off and go down the stairs. There's no... anyway. If you are attending online, you can connect with each other in the chat, and don't forget that the link for virtual coffee hour can be found in our weekly e-news. Families with children are invited to connect with our Director of Religious Education, Danielle Kazemchek. After the service, well, she's not here this week, but you might be able to find some information from someone with children about the RE program. We encourage you to take a moment now to send your joys and concerns so that they are received in time for the pastoral prayer. You can access the online Joys and Concerns form via the link available in your order of service, in the live stream description with QR codes that are in your pews, or aim a smartphone at the QR code on the screen, and that will work too. There are several announcements this morning. Our electronic giving service has revamped its platform and added an app. So we are switching over to a QR code, it's on there, for Sunday offering rather than the text to give number. The info in the order of service has been updated, and in the pew racks, there are sheets with QR codes for the complete order of service, joys and concerns, and online giving. If you prefer to use the text to give number, it will still work. Our coming of age and youth group participants are holding a bake sale and selling fair trade coffee, chocolate, tea, and hot cocoa on Sunday, October 15th. Now, some of you may have seen it as the 8th at various places and had your heart set on getting some today, but there are no baked goods today. You'll have to wait till next week. Come on back, it'll be another good service. This fundraiser will benefit our Boston Trip Fund. St. Louis area Trunk or Treat is Saturday, October 21st from 4:30 to 6. Get on your costumes, decorate your vehicle, fill the trunk with goodies, and head over to First Unitarian Church of St. Louis for our first ever All St. Louis Congregational Trunk or Treat. Okay, and that'll be over there in the parking lot. Trunk, with two U's. Trunk or treat. Okay. Oh, quit busting my chops, Joel. The regular First Sunday Welcoming Congregation meeting has been moved to Sunday, October 22nd. Welcome to this religious community where we affirm the dignity and freedom of all who enter. Here we seek to live together in relationship and respect so that we may embrace and celebrate our differences. Our religious values invite us to a shared journey of truth and meaning. Sincerity and connection guide our religious community and call us into deeper association with ourselves and our world. Welcome. We are glad you are part of our community this morning. Now, please enjoy Prelude in G Major by director Earl Naylor.
Good morning. It's good to be back. I am Sabrina Trupia, and I use they, them pronouns. Our opening words today come from Keakili Bordner. Come together again, gather in love, light the fire of hope, build a foundation, commit together again, gather in truth, light the fire of freedom, build the entryways, continue together, again gather in community, light the fire of the future, build the shelter. I invite you to rise, are you willing and able, and join us in our opening hymn, number 114, Forward Through the Ages. Nope.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's
Oops.
number 317.
317, in the same hymnal, We Are Not Our Own.
Our chalice lighting comes from Paul Sprecher. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge orthodoxy, even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths.
Good morning. My name's Caitlin Hill, she, her, hers. Danielle is taking the day off today. Sunday off a month. So I am doing the story of all ages. If any other kids would like to join the other kids in the front pew here, they are welcome to, but they don't have to. All right, hey, you gang in the front, you ready? Ready for this story? Okay. This one is about a man who was a universal Unitarian a long time ago named Thomas Starr King. What? I better not use all of her tablet battery reading this story. Okay, I'll do my best. This story is called A Bright Star. A long time ago, when railroad trains were still brand new, and the United States had only 24 stars on its flag instead of 50, there lived a boy whose name was Starr. That may seem like an odd sort of name to us today, the name Starr. Isn't that weird? Yeah. No. Not weird? Okay. It's unusual. But his mother's last name had been Starr before she was married, and back then, children were often given their mother's maiden name as their middle name. Starr's full name was really Thomas Starr King, but there were lots and lots of boys named Thomas around, and so his family called him Starr. Starr was bright, just like his name. He was bright in school, learning his lessons well. He was bright at home, helping out cheerfully and doing his chores without complaints. Not too many, anyway. And he was bright at the Universalist church his family went to, where his father was a minister. Starr was always happy to help. He carried the hymnals, he polished the candle holders, and he helped dust the pews. And he didn't roll on the floor. Sit up, please. Yes, because I asked you to. But most of all, Starr loved to ring the church bell, like this one. On Sunday mornings, bright and early, he'd climb the stairs to the bell tower. He'd grab the rope with both hands and pull, and then bong would go the bell, and up would go Starr. That rope would pull him right off his feet, and then he'd come down with a thump, and the bell would go dong. Then Starr would give that rope another pull, and up he'd go again, even higher this time, and the bell would go bong. Kira sounded like a cat instead of a bell. Starr loved ringing that church bell. He loved other music too. He loved singing, especially at church, where lots of people sang in harmony. Some sang high, some sang low, some sang in between, but all the different voices worked together to create one glorious song, just like our choir. Starr liked everything about church. When I grow up, Starr said, I'm going to be a minister in a church just like my father. And Starr was. When he was 21, he was a minister in a Universalist church. But then, when he was 24, he changed churches. He became a minister at a Unitarian church. Back then, the Universalists and Unitarians were still separate. Starr was ahead of his time. He was a Universalist Unitarian over 100 years before the rest of us became Unitarian Universalists. He became a Unitarian Universalist 100 years before everyone else did. Some of his friends weren't happy to see him change. Starr, they said, how can you leave Universalism? I'm not leaving Universalism, Starr said. I can be a Unitarian and Universalist at the same time. I'm just singing a different part. We all sing together to make one glorious song. In 1860, when railroads went from state to state and there were 33 stars on the American flag, Starr left Boston, Massachusetts, and moved all the way across the country to San Francisco, California. His friends weren't happy to see him go. Starr, they said, how can you move so far away? I'm not leaving our country, Starr said. I'm just moving to a different state. All the states work together to make one great nation. But the year was 1860, and not everyone agreed. The Civil War was coming, and the nation was being torn apart. Some states to the north, and some states to the south. The stars were coming off the flag. California was in the west, and no one was sure which way it would go. Thomas Starr King was sure that the states should stay together, one nation indivisible, and he set out to convince everyone in California of that too. He was a minister at his church in San Francisco, and he preached there on Sundays, but he also traveled around the state and made speeches. He made speeches in towns and in mining camps, in great lecture halls and in canvas tents. He made speeches in front of thousands and thousands of people. He didn't convince all the people, but he convinced enough. And in 1861, California voted to stay in the Union and to keep its star on the American flag. He saved California for the Union, said a general in the Union Army, and that helps the North win the war. The people of California still remember him for that today. California put a statue of him in the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco and sent another statue to Washington, D.C. He has 2 mountains named after him, one in California's Yosemite National Park and one in New Hampshire's White Mountains. Both the Unitarians and the Universalists still remember him, and we've set his name on the school where some of our ministers go, the Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California. So you may hear his name from time to time, and now you know why. Thomas Starr King was a bright and shining star. All right, so now it's time to sing you guys off to your classes.
Let's go.
Each week, we bring our joys, celebrations, sorrows, and concerns with us into this community. We share them so that we may support each other and lighten the burden of any sorrow and concern we are carrying, as well as intensifying our joys and celebrations. Now is the time in our service when we connect with one another by sharing our sorrows and concerns. We send condolences to Becky Grimaud, who recently lost her father. Condolences to Judy Crouch, who lost her aunt. Carol Vizzetti on Wednesday. And it seems odd for me to be saying this, but we are also sending healing thoughts to my daughter, Katie, who is having tests done and is in the hospital at the moment. Oh, let's see. We have some other concerns that are here. This is the time when we go into the concerns that people have sent in. And Someone says, my friend's birthday is all the way at 3 p.m. today, and I can't wait. There is concern for a sister who is struggling to stay healthy, and a grandmother who just found a lump on her adrenal gland. We hold these concerns with tenderness and compassion. May they be lighter because they are shared. Now, as a community, we also share our joys and celebrations with one another. Congratulations to George Grimm Howell on receiving preliminary fellowship from the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. Yay. One of the joys continues from the concerns. My friend's birthday is today. A successful fundraising effort at Swansea Mutual Aid Resource Treasury to replace our smart box to a more durable model. So we have a number of joys, and we elevate these joys with contagious gladness and celebration. May they be magnified because they are shared. Let's see. I need to get back to this. Okay.
With many joys and concerns remaining unspoken in our hearts and minds, I invite you into a spirit of prayer and mindful attention. Today, I brought to you my translation into modern words of an old prayer attributed to Sir Francis Drake, entitled, "Disturb Us, O Lord." Change us, O Holy One, when we are reluctant to change, when we have dreamed too little and maybe too late, and we think we have arrived safely when in fact we never left our comfortable home. God of many names, make us uncomfortable when in the abundance of material things we don't realize we lost our moral imagination and cannot fathom how change is always possible. Disturb us, O God, to dare more boldly, to venture outside of our wildest dreams and rest in your confidence and embrace. If we are lost, may we find you to be near us, helping us find our way. We ask you, O great Spirit, to rest in us and push back the horizons of our hopes and to lead us into a future of change, courage, hope, and love. Amen.
It is the mission of the First Unitarian Church of St. Louis to be a welcoming congregation, inspiring lives of loving kindness and integrity by nurturing spirituality, building community, and advancing justice. Your contributions support our mission and ministry in the St. Louis regions and beyond. This morning's offering will now be received.
So I want to thank the choir for this beautiful rendition of The Road Home. We're grateful for all your gifts, material and otherwise. And I personally want to thank Pam for facilitating my presence here today and being a worship associate. And I want to thank my spouse, Ed, because I forgot half of my sermon at home if it weren't for him. So thank you all.
Today's reading is an excerpt from Substance and Show, or Facts and Forces, by Thomas Starr King. I propose to speak on the difference between substance and show, or the distinction we should make between facts of the world and life, and the casual forces which lie behind and beneath them. Most persons, doubtless, if you place before them a paving stone and a slip of paper with some writing on it, would not hesitate to say that there is much more substance to say in the rock than in the paper, as there's heaviness. Yet they might make a great mistake. Suppose that the slip of paper contains the sentence, God is love, or thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, or all men have moral rights by reason of heavenly parentage. Then the paper represents more force and substance than the stone. Heaven and earth may pass away, but such words can never die out or become less real. The word substance means that which stands under and supports anything else. Whatever then creates, upholds, classifies anything which our senses behold, though we cannot handle, see, taste, or smell it, is more substantial than the object itself. In this way, the soul, which vivifies, moves, and supports the body, is a more potent substance than the hard bones and heavy flesh which it vitalizes. There is a very general tendency to deny that ideal forces have any practical power. But there have been several thinkers whose skepticism has an opposite direction. We cannot, they say, attribute external reality to the sensations we feel. We need not wonder that this theory has failed to convince the unmetaphysical common sense of people that a stone post is merely a stubborn thought and that the bite of a dog is nothing but an acquaintance with a pugnacious four-footed conception. And yet, by more satisfactory evidence than that which the idealists propose, we are warned against confounding this conception of substance with matter and confining it to things we can see and grasp. Science steps in and shows us that the physical system of things leans on spirit. A world of matter simply would be a huge heap of sandy atoms or an infinite continent of stagnant vapor. There would be no motion, no force, no form, no order, no beauty in the universe as it is now. Organization meets us at every step, and wherever we look, organization implies spirit, something that rules, disposes, penetrates, and vivifies matter.
For each child is born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreaming. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. This is a song that is number 1051 in our teal hymnal by Yesay Barnwell, a former member of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And I felt it was appropriate to the theme of the month, which is the gift of heritage. My own grandmother's prayers, my grandfather's dreams, and the breath of my ancestors are proudly displayed on my altar, the focus point for my spiritual practice of meditation. the lace doily crocheted by one of my grandmas, and a chunk of sulfur with beautiful little crystals that my grandfather gave me surround a picture of my other grandparents toasting to their 50th wedding anniversary. The breath of my ancestors touches the sacred images of local saints arranged around the chalice. I have a lot of heritage on display in my altar, and that helps my spirit. But I wasn't always so enmeshed in my heritage. Heck, I wasn't even proud of it for a long time. For me, for the longest time, my heritage felt like a hindrance instead of a gift. I could only see the downside of people in my family, and I was not proud of being from Sicily. Because you see, if I had a nickel for every time someone, upon hearing that I'm from Sicily, asked me about the mafia, I would have a lot of nickels. And of course, I don't feel this way anymore. Maybe because I'm older and maybe I'm wiser. I hope I'm wiser. But mostly because I changed my mind when I understood that I contain all of my heritage. I am my geography. I am my history. I am my family. I am the breath of my ancestors, and because I am the breath of my ancestors, through them I am woven into the fabric of the universe, or the divine, if you're thus inclined. So in a way, it was inevitable then that I would become captivated by Unitarian Universalism. With a beautiful, complicated, difficult, and yet salvific history. Yes, salvific, Unitarian Universalism quite literally saves lives because of its history. Also, I'm a church history nerd. And you know what's cool about knowing even just a little bit of UU history? When we are asked about our faith tradition, say at dinner parties, we can respond by making references to figures from history, literature, science, and philosophy, people that everyone knows about. No, I don't mean Thoreau and Emerson. I mean people like Charles Dickens and Sylvia Plath, Paul Newman and Gary Gygax, the guy that invented Dungeons and Dragons, Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, physicist Linus Pauling, philosopher Bertrand Russell, and my personal favorite, P.T. Barnum, a Universalist. I could go on, but is this all there is to our faith? A static monument to larger-than-life, mostly white old men? I mean, of course, the answer is no, otherwise I wouldn't be giving this sermon, clearly. I think it's a matter of being curious and moving beyond the usual suspects or the usual story that is told about the usual suspects. And this history, we must keep in mind that it's not all glorious either. The history of Unitarian Universalism is full of both and. Holy and unholy, historical errors and inspiring ideas. For instance, in our history, we have the first woman minister. No, not Olympia Brown, but Universalist Lydia Ann Jenkins. That is a big deal even today. There are denominations that have problems with women preachers. Back then, in the 1800s, was extraordinary. So that's good. But we also have in our ranks those who were leaders of the eugenics movement, perfecting the human race in the name of bad science and hurting countless people for not adhering to a normalcy that doesn't exist. And of course, we have many colonizers, both here and elsewhere. And while we have a lot of abolitionists in our ranks, there were Unitarians and Universalists, enslavers, and the list goes on, both and. And hey, my ancestors weren't saints either. I am not perfect, but at the same time, when I put myself in the line of my heritage, I understand so much more about myself and about the history of where I'm from. Our new UUA president, Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, in a sermon a while ago said that our living tradition is a, quote, a weary and ragged miracle. A weary and ragged miracle, but it's a miracle nonetheless. So I want to speak to some of these miracles and how they intersect our present, because I think it's spiritually important to know and understand our heritage. In our continuing responsible search for truth and meaning, we must know where we came from before we can know where we are going. We UUs were always heretics. The word heretic comes from the Greek hieretikos, which means able to choose. In our case, able to choose a belief or a theology. And before I move on with saying this word many times in the rest of the sermon, before I get too far into the discussion, I want to clarify that when I talk about theology, I don't simply mean the discipline that is a branch of philosophy and is viewed as the sole purview of academics and religious professionals. No. And also, I don't mean that it has to do with God, because despite the etymology of theos meaning God in Greek, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the divine. My definition of theology is broader. I think theology is what describes our spiritual worldview. Theology helps answer the big questions in life, but doesn't necessitate a religion or religious confession. We all have our own theologies, even though we might not think we do. Just ask yourself, why are you here on a Sunday morning? Or what makes you feel alive? What makes you feel connected to the universe? What is your answer to why do bad things happen to good people? You all have an opinion on these universal questions. And that collection of opinions is what I call theology. And of course, the history of our faith ancestors is a history of their theologies. Universalism in America was born first, before Unitarianism, and was more popular early on, especially during a period called the Second Great Awakening, where there were a lot of fire and brimstone preachers, leaving people yearning to hear the Universalist message that there is no hell, that love is the center of our worship. Universalist theology is all about centering ourselves in the power of love. The Unitarians came later and were more upper class, wealthier, better read, did not have traveling preachers like the Universalists did. And in fact, they were opposed to traveling preachers. And in general, so they were a more intellectual bunch. But they too had thoughts about divine love. William Ellery Channing, a Unitarian minister and one of the main theologians that we claim as Unitarian and Universalist, was the one who proposed moving away from the idea of the fallenness of humankind, which is in chapter 3 of Genesis, to the idea that humans are made in God's image because God loves us, which is in chapter 1 of Genesis. Remember, those two denominations were Christians for a long time. The Universalists were impressed by some of these Unitarian ideas, to be honest, and one of the more famous exponents of Universalism, somebody you may have heard of, Hosea Ballou, had even quoted some of Channing's idea in his Universalist magazine. This attention, however, wasn't reciprocated. as Channing refused to ever even meet with Ballou, whose church was 2 blocks down the road, and pointedly criticized him in a sermon entitled The Evil of Sin, in which he directly referred to Ballou by saying, "Some among us thought punishment occurred during our lifetime. This, according to Channing, quote, tends to diminish the dread of sin." And that was bad, right? Because if you don't threaten people with sin, who will come to church on Sunday, right? Who indeed? And yet, despite differences and some animosities, around the 1850s, there were a handful of Universalists and Unitarians who might had already have been keen on a merger. This, as the Time for All Ages has said, was over 100 years before the actual merger happened in 1961. Henry Whitney Bellows, a minister in one of the many Unitarian churches in New York City, had started to think that the theological differences between Unitarians and Universalists were narrow enough that a merger could be possible. In fact, he had started criticizing Unitarianism, saying that it was becoming too individualistic, and he thought that, quote, the Holy Spirit communicates more reliably to humanity in general than with individuals, unquote. So Universalism was appealing to Reverend Bellows because it was about universal love and the relationality of creation and community. So when he met a Universalist pastor by the name of Thomas Starr King, he recommended him for the Unitarian Holly Street Parish in Boston, which you've seen the pictures of. And the rest, as we heard in the Story for All Ages, is history. But while Starr King is remembered by many as being the Universalist minister that ministered to Unitarians, we typically don't expand about the details of his ministry, just like the Story for All Ages did. But that might have something to do with why he was in favor of a merger. Starr King was what we now would call an activist minister, as you heard. He went around giving speeches, campaigning to make California part of the Union. California is always a big deal when there are elections, and it was so even before it was a state, and he's credited for having made it part of the Union. He was also very active in the formation of the Federal Sanitary Commission and in collecting funds for the Western Sanitary Commission, organizations which helped the wounded soldiers in the Civil War, helped them not to die of infection, helped them after in their reentry. Sidebar, if you're familiar with the history of this congregation, you might know that the founder of this congregation, William Greenleaf Eliot, was also the founder of the Western Sanitary Commission, for which Thomas Starr King collected enormous sums of money to keep it going. Small world even back then, isn't it, right? End of sidebar. Starr King's theology made him look beyond his own denominational boundaries to expand his reach to work towards a just and free country and community. Theology connects us. This is what I find beautiful about our faith when it's done right. Because of our heretical heritage, we are capable of thinking dialectically, and that is a great thing. You see, each of us you use believes things differently. We seek truth differently. We each follow our path, and yet we can talk to each other. When we engage with each other's beliefs through dialogue, we open ourselves to the risk of being changed by this experience. Dialectic. We don't have to agree, just hold 2 or more different ideas in our head at the same time. when we trust each other's adherence to a responsible search for truth and meaning, the reward is an awareness of new spiritual destinations. It is the power of dialogue that keeps us open and accepting. So what about the merger? When I read historical documents about that time, I have to admit I get the impression that the only reason why the merger eventually happened in the 60s was basically one of dollars and cents. The two denominations joined together because they did not want to disappear. So a lot of the discussion that you see in books about this was financial. And that's funny because Bellows and Starr King thought a merger was possible on the basis of theology. And you know what I find interesting too is that theology isn't mentioned much except in pre-merger voices of dissent, such as the arguments made by Universalist Reverend Albert Q. Perry and Unitarian Reverend Walter D. Kring. You see, these two ministers both contended that the theologies were too far apart to allow for a merger. Reverend Perry, the Universalist, didn't mince words, and his skepticism came from thinking that a faith based on love and on emotional engagement, such as Universalism, would be difficult to blend with Unitarianism, which he considered based on reasoning and logic. He almost presciently said that the results of the merger could lead to a suppression of Universalism if it wasn't embraced fully. And here's what he said. He said, quote, "We can hope that discussions of the merger will help clarify our dissimilarity and produce a willingness on the part of each to be what it really is," unquote. And that didn't really happen, did it? Reverend Kring, the Unitarian's argument against the merger was almost entirely based on the idea that differences between theologies would be too difficult to solve and, quote, would require most of the energy of most of the people of most of the churches for the next 2 years, unquote. And I think Reverend Kring was being overly optimistic about it only lasting 2 years, though, because it's been 63 years post-merger, and in this span of time, it's only recently that an effort has been made to strengthen our UU values by pairing them up with theologies. I love our faith. And as I said, when we do it right, our theologies inspire dialogue and open new horizons. And when they are not, problems arise that almost always have to do with a lack of explicit theological framing. Remember, theology, the thing about the spiritual worldview. These values that we covenant to affirm and promote can be misunderstood or used disingenuously if there is no theological backbone to support them. Theology must be the foundation for a faith tradition like ours that has no creed and no dogma. In the words of Thomas Starr King, theology must be for us the substance, not the show, if we are to move forward together in our shared faith. The substance is needed to support our weary and ragged and miraculous living tradition. Unitarians and Universalists, being heretics, were always able to choose their theology, something that continues to this day, and it is expressed in our fourth principle that I've mentioned a couple times already, as well as in the revised Article 2 in the form of one of our values, which is pluralism. And today it is our theology, or rather our theologies, plural, that allow us to be open to the new, like our ancestors were when they were at their best. It is our theologies that give us the courage of our convictions. It is our theologies that can keep us engaged in the work of justice. Joined in the interweaving breath of our ancestors, our theologies can give us hope for a future where there is room for all and all are welcome. May it be so. Amen. Right, sorry. Our closing hymn is number 1003, Where Do We Come From, Where Are We Going? Please rise as you're willing and able and join us.
This particular hymn, being a round, we have to sing it as a round, of course. The choir will help lead this in singing this. We did this once pre-pandemic when we were meeting in the chapel in the summer, so you may remember it, you may not. What we're going to do, we're going to sing it all through completely, then we'll do it as a two-part round. I said we're a little sparse in the congregation, so I don't want to try anything more than two parts. The second time around, this side will be number one, and the women will help lead that side. This side will be number two, the men will help lead that side. For those of you that don't read music and understand the little dots at the end of each line gets sung twice. So we'll do each line twice, all together, and then we'll do it as a round, this group starting, this group coming in afterwards, and this group, when you get to the end, just repeat the line so we all finish together, okay? So, it goes like this. Ready? Here we go. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Our closing words come from Kenneth Patton, who gave his vision of where we might be going. He says, "The temple of tomorrow will be set in the center of the community, a hub for the life of the people. Religion will no longer seek to save us from the world. It will save us in the world." Amen. Blessed be and go in peace.